Sandy and I talked about how we were going to do today's presentation, and we decided that we're going to keep it a little bit less formal than you usually have your speakers do. And we know most of you know all of that, both of us, and but we wanted to give you a different kind of introduction. We put these brief introductions together for a leadership course that we both participated in last year, so we thought we'd share with the group because it gives you a bit of a different insight into who we are, and also kind of it's a good pathway into the discussion we'll be having together. Now, full disclosure, Sandy and I know each other very well. We've become very good friends. We love to talk, especially over a glass of wine. So that's what our imagination will be doing today. But I will kick it off with my introduction. So again, this was for leadership, and we were trying to be a little bit different. So the first thing is that as a Latino woman, a lot of people ask where my inspiration came from, where all my confidence came from, because it's not easily come by, especially when you're a woman, especially when you're a Latina. However, I was very fortunate to grow up in a household where the men in my family were very non-traditional Mexican men. They pushed me, they made me understand, that's me in the high chair that they're trying to shove a turkey leg into. But, you know, my father basically made me think I was the most important person in the world, that I could do anything I set my mind to. He was at every softball game, every spelling bee, every teacher's conference. My mother was too, but my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and so she was a very important part of my life in a very different way. My brother Frank, who's the one that's sitting down trying to feed me, kept pushing me to aspire higher. If I said, he has a story where I told him I wanted to be a police officer. He said, no, you need to go into law. I don't remember that, but okay. So, and then Albert was the risk taker, obviously, in our family. He was the sneaky one, he was the risk taker, he was the one that went into all the thrill sports. He's the one that showed me that you have to take risks in your life. If you want to achieve what you can in your lifetime, you have to take risks. As many of you know, now I'm in Half Moon Bay, but my path here was discovering San Francisco and San Francisco State and never wanting to go back to the little town of Santa Maria. I loved it. My first long-term position was with San Mateo County, and I ended up coming here and staying. I love San Mateo County, I love the coast side. It's just become my home. And now, what's next? So currently I'm the Administrative Services Director for the City of Half Moon Bay, and my husband and I are trying to decide what's next. He's already figured it out. He's retired since 2014. He's embarked on a whole different career path, and so now it's up to me to decide what I want to do, and he's totally supportive of it. But you know, as my next step as an assistant city manager, unfortunately that means I have to leave. Because we have a fantastic executive team with the city, and I'm not just saying that because my boss's boss is here, but we do. We have a fantastic executive team that aren't going anywhere anytime soon, knock on wood. So that means if I want to grow in my career, I have to think of other options. Is it retirement? Maybe I do love it here. I love working for the city, so maybe I stay until I retire. And then I threw in and write my book, because everyone wants to write a book, right? So, but having been HR in a fire department, a hospital, and a county and a city, I have a lot of interesting stories to tell. So that is me. I always love saying this to people. My maiden name is Lopez, and you know, a lot of times people question my decisions, and my standard line is, it's a Lopez thing, you just wouldn't understand. So I am going to turn it over to Sandy. I'm going to put her slides up, and hopefully that gave you a little insight into who I am.
Wow, that's a hard act to follow. As Lisa said, we're very good friends and colleagues. And I want to start off while she's finding my slides, is just to thank AAUW for this amazing opportunity for us to tell you a little bit more about ourselves and the work that we do. So you can tell your story in many different ways, and I chose to tell mine through the different places that I've lived, because that really has informed the person that I've become. So I was born, I'm going to move over here so I'm not standing in the way. I was born in Gweru, this place here, so the middle of the country, small country to the north of South Africa. My parents went there in the 50s, and they went on a 2 or 3 year contract and ended up staying because they loved it so much and the lifestyle was so amazing. So these are some tourist pictures. There's Victoria Falls, which is one of the widest falls in the world. That's the Kariba Dam, and at the bottom picture is the Wangi National Park. And these are all the places that I went on honeymoon, can you imagine? And it was just in my backyard. So I left Zimbabwe just after I got married, and I went to live in South Africa. And I lived in Cape Town, very bottom corner, left-hand corner. And I had spent 17 years in South Africa, where I had a number of, I owned a number of different companies to do with advertising. So I owned a model agency, a photographic production company, and then we also had some properties that we rented out to models when they were in South Africa. So these are some of the pictures of South Africa. Table Mountain is just absolutely spectacular, and the middle picture is one of the wine farms there. So Cape Town is very like San Francisco in terms of the geography, the diversity, all of the lovely things that you can do. So I stayed in Cape Town until I turned 40. And when I turned 40, I must have had some kind of midlife crisis, because that was when we decided to come to America. Oh, well, along the way, we also lived in Oxford in England for a year. And that is the Harry Potter Hall and then pontoon on the River Isis. Right, so now we get to being in Lexington, Kentucky. While I was there, when I first arrived, I wasn't able to work because I didn't have a work permit. And so I decided to go back to school, and that ended up being much longer path, and I did more there than I had ever anticipated I would do. As was said earlier on, I did a master's in health administration, and then I did a PhD in public administration and a health policy track. So a lot of an administrative theme going on. So that's, of course, Kentucky is the horses and the bourbon distilleries. And then I came to live on the coast, in Half Moon Bay for a few years, and now I live in Moss Beach, which is just one of the most beautiful places, as you know. Since I've been in California, I worked for 10 years at Stanford, and that was really the start of my work among older adults, but I think we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's the introduction to me.
So thank you for indulging us, and we'll jump right in. So Sandy, let's talk a little bit about your work at Stanford and what was so significant that directed your work to working with older adults and in turn working towards defeating and working against ageism.
So when I worked at Stanford, before I was accepted into the postdoctoral program, I worked for 2 years in a project. So this is actually a little bit of a sidestep. I worked for 2 years in a project with a university in Saudi Arabia. So I got to go to Saudi Arabia a couple of times, and every time I did that, I had to wear all my face coverings, and even if I wanted to go down the passageway in the hotel. And it was very interesting to see how differently women are treated in Saudi Arabia compared to the freedoms that we're used to here. And I think one of the most compelling things I found about that experience was that even though there are a lot of structural barriers to women being able to drive or vote or shop or own property or any of the things that we so often take for granted, they are so resilient, and they figure out ways through the networks and the connections they have with each other to do all sorts of things that we probably wouldn't do. So wearing those long abayas, in Saudi Arabia it's all black. Even they have only their eyes are exposed. And I was there as a physical activity researcher, and we were saying, well, what is the biggest barriers to you being physically active? And we were thinking it must be these clothes that you wear in 140-degree temperatures. But they said, oh no, we can climb sand dunes wearing those clothes. That's just sort of an attitude of mind kind of thing. But one of the biggest barriers for them was the fact that they couldn't drive. So they can't go anywhere unless their husbands give them, hire a driver for them or let them go somewhere. So that was an interesting sort of sidestep before I started working in the aging. Once I finished working in that project, I got into the postdoctoral program, and my mentor, her lab was the Healthy Aging Research and Technology Solutions Lab. So we did all of our work around how we can use technology to help older adults be healthier, so apps on the phone and things like that. And then something else that I'm really interested in is your built environment, so how the environment in which you live affects your ability to make healthy decisions. So that was sort of the start of my passion for older adults. What about you, Lisa?
Mine came more indirectly. My parents were older when they had me, so that by the time I was graduating high school, they were already in their late 50s. And so when I started college, my father was hurt when I was in junior high, so he was on disability. Watching them struggle and their friends struggle to try to get medical care, to try to get Medi-Cal, Social Security, it actually enraged me, because they had spent their whole life working, and yet they were struggling to get what they thought would come naturally as they grew older. So I had a personal vested interest in this. I actually had to leave school and go home to take care of my father, so mine wasn't as professional into the path as Sandy. I left school to go home and care for my father, which is in itself an experience on caregiving and older adults and trying to get necessities for them. While I was there, I started looking into resources for senior citizens, and because I asked a lot of questions and I made a lot of appointments. I was a journalism major, by the way, when I did this, so I was very much just pick up the phone and see who will talk to me. I actually met the director of the Area Agency on Aging in Santa Barbara County, and her and I just discovered that we had a lot in common. She liked my passion. I was only in my 20s, so the fact that somebody my age was taking such a vested interest in it, she asked me to be a member of the Area Agency on Aging. That actually led to my long-standing interest in working with seniors and working on issues that impact them, from everything from healthcare to ride transportation to technical assistance, everything that, and so I've always found the best way I could do that is by volunteer for agencies that serve them. So with that, however, so during the course of this, I came back, my father passed away, I came back to the Bay Area, and I started looking for jobs. I decided to switch my major. I became a political science major, and in that course, I started working with politicians. I worked in the state assembly and quickly finagled a way to make myself the, what did I call myself? The constituent caseworker. So that way I didn't have to go to a lot of events, because that just is not my favorite thing. But I actually got to go in the field and work with people who were having problems, who came to the assemblyman and said, can you help me solve this? Whether it was with DMV or the State Business Bureau, and I loved it. I loved helping the constituents. I didn't so much like the hours and the temperament of the politician I was working for. So that's when I got involved with, and I applied for the San Mateo County Commission on the Status of Women and became their director. That was just the epitome of the greatest job. I can incorporate all the work and tackle everything, tackle ageism, tackle discrimination based on gender, on race. We tried to tackle all the heavy issues. We were focused on women, but as you know, all those things can hit every single person in every single different way. We instituted the Older Women's Summit, which I don't think is in existence now, but we also did a young women's conference called Hear Me Roar. So that is kind of, my interest came as a result of my volunteerism and then my professional inquiries. And today my job is mostly taking care of the city's finances and people, but I volunteer for senior co-siders, and also because my former city manager knew how much of an interest I had in senior issues, actually appointed me to work with the Age Friendly here on the co-side, Age Friendly Coalition, which works. So we're constantly thinking of ways that we can help citizens, and it trickles down, as you all know. It trickles down. You do something that helps one group, and others will actually benefit from that. So Sandy, so when we sit here talking, what's one of the things that really stand out to you now on the coast side that we still have to really work towards as women and I'm a senior now. I actually take very much pride when I turn 55. It comes from my mom. When she turned 50, we actually got her a t-shirt that said, "Where's my senior discount?" She was so proud of being a senior, so.
Well, I think the coast is an amazing community, and I think that we've had many issues and challenges, particularly even just this year, that have really shown how cohesive our community is and how closely we work together to support people across the board. I think that there are some really big intractable issues that it's difficult to think about as one individual how you might go about fixing those things. So it's obviously big things like housing, transportation, access to healthcare. So I think as individuals, we might not be able to we can't go out and build new housing, but we can certainly become advocates for those things. And so I think that there's a great role to play for advocacy and that is not only through city and county meetings. I think that the more people who come to city and county meetings and have a measured, thoughtful 2-minute speech to prepare, the more you'll be listened to. I think that there's sometimes too much rhetoric and that doesn't always help. I think that you need to be thoughtful and you need to be considerate when you make your remarks. So I think advocacy is definitely something that can happen. Something else that Lisa mentioned that she does and I do too, and I think a lot of you do too, is volunteerism. I think when you volunteer, you often get more out of that than you put in. And I think volunteering helps to raise everybody's boat. You do something good for somebody else and that spreads through the community. And then I think one of the other things that's really important is to get involved with different things that are going on. So I was involved in the Coastside Recovery Initiative. There's currently the Downtown Streetscapes where they're looking for input. And I think you've got to be at the table when there's important things going on. If you're not at the table, your voice is not going to be heard. So you have to put yourself out there. And even if you don't like public speaking, often for these public meetings, it's a 2-minute comment period. You can write your comments out in advance and then you can get the opportunity to talk about them. So I would say that getting involved with the different things that go on helps to connect you to people, connect you to issues, and allows you to be an advocate for the issues that you really care about, whether that be ageism, sexism, racism, any of the other isms that there are.
I think as well, collaboration is key. And I think we're seeing it more out of necessity. We saw it more out of necessity earlier this year. The collaboration between the nonprofits, the collaboration between city and county. But I would always encourage ways to look for more opportunities to collaborate, because I think the more we can work together, the more area we cover. the more things we can accomplish. For example, going back to, I mentioned we're working on an age-friendly project coalition right now. And one of the projects that we're working on is an healthcare advocacy committee. What started out as just trying to form the committee is now a table that where the county sits, the city sits. We've invited Dignity Health, we've invited Kaiser, we've invited Stanford to sit and talk about solutions. We've been having this discussion, as most of you know who've lived on the coast, for years. I mean, we're going into double-digit amount of years. But I don't, and maybe the idea has been broached before about a collaborative effort between these groups, but we're not gonna let it go. We're going to keep pushing it, because I think one of the more important things is that sometimes when people just get tired of trying to push up a hill, they just let the boulder roll down. We don't wanna do that. We know that, and actually this January showed, we need some type of urgent care, healthcare facility on the coast side. By working together and getting people to the table and talking about their needs and their experiences, we're showing the people that are at the table who have been there before but maybe not paying quite as much attention, that this is something that can happen. We can actually do this. And this is a project that Senior Co-Siders, and I forgot to mention Senior Co-Siders is, we have community representation. Carol is actually our chair. I have to throw a shout out there, of the Age Friendly. So if this is something you're interested in, there's always room at the table. If you're involved in a group that you think collaboration with another group would be a great idea because you have a project that's just a smidge too big, I've already thought of ways we can help advertise Tech Trek next time around in our city newsletter. So it just, those little things actually carry a lot of weight and help with the progress, because we're not done. There's so much work to be done. And just when we think we've accomplished what we need to, something else happens and it opens another door that we need to kind of push through. So I know we're getting kind of close on time, so I don't know if we want to open it up for questions.
Well, can I say one other thing? I think one of the most important things that AAUW does is mentoring. And I think that is so fundamentally important to support women and girls to achieve everything that they can be, is to be in a mentoring role, either as a mentee or as a mentor. And it doesn't matter how high up the ladder you get, you can always still use mentors. So I think that helps to empower people, it helps to make professional connections, which can double the amount of work and effect that you can have. So that's one of the things I really think is so wonderful about AAUW, is the very strong mentoring, training, teaching role that this organization has to empower young women.
A little side note about AAUW. When I first lived on the coast, I wanted to join so bad, but because I left school to take care of my father, I still needed 6 units to graduate from college. So I have to say, the minute I got my degree, I actually had to go, it was before internet, so I had to go back to get my degree when I was working full time. I actually signed up to become a member. It wasn't here, unfortunately, because I wasn't living on the coast at the time, but AAUW is actually such a wonderful organization, and it was such a pleasure meeting Ruth, who started the chapter out here on the coast side. So, Sandy is right. This is a wonderful organization, and there's so much potential for what we can do, what we've already done in the coast side. The AAUW name is out there, and people know that you're working towards giving young women and women opportunities. So thank you for all you do. And if we have a few minutes, we can do, if you guys have any questions. Probably not.
You mentioned Dignity and Kaiser and one other. How about Sutter? Are they being invited to?
They will be invited, yes. They are on my list.
Cooperative, I know.
Yes. And I'm sorry?
They're not terribly cooperative.
Yes, they are on my list. We kind of took the low-hanging fruit first. But yes, they are. Any major provider we're going to bring to the table. So.
And are you aware that Stanford actually shut down our clinic that we used to have?
No, I wasn't.
Because we were not profit. profitable enough?
Yes. See, and that's the problem. If one provider tries to take or assume the responsibility, other than the county, who's running a clinic right now, because all they do is Medi-Cal, but if one provider tries to undertake that, it's not gonna be successful. Because there is not, Kaiser actually has a facility for every 25,000 patients. We have 5,000 out here on the coast. So that's the kind of thinking. We have to go a little bit more in depth, do a little bit more research. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. We can't have just one provider taking the responsibility because we want to succeed, and it has to be a collaborative effort. And we're at the very beginning stages. So if you're interested, healthcare advocacy committees are the second Monday. I have business cards if you're interested. I can send you the information if you'd like to participate. It's open to the public, open to community members. Age-friendly is as well, so just let us know.
Can you elaborate a little bit on your efforts on ageism? What do you mean by ageism?
So from a volunteer standpoint, some of the work that we've done, or I've done in my volunteerism, is work for agencies that actually support seniors, and that's anyone 50 or over, and actually, to be very frank, adults with disabilities. So when we are looking at, or from my standpoint, when I say I'm trying to work against ageism, it's actually, for me, helping people develop resources, because the doors are shutting, unfortunately. When you don't have access to transportation, to healthcare, to somebody to help you with your phone. I mean, because they've kind of shut the door on you. You can find programs for teenagers, or you can find programs for young families, but the seniors actually are more limited in their outreach and how they get communicated to. So what my efforts is working for programs and helping programs that are communicating and getting resources out. Making sure that no matter what age you are, your needs are taken seriously, and actually giving you the resources you need to survive. Whether it's a grocery delivery service, or it's a ride to your doctor's office, because you can't drive anymore because your eyesight's not what it used to be. My 73-year-old brother won't drive right now because he has cataracts. So trying to find a ride for him in a little town like Santa Maria was almost impossible. But and he didn't want to use Uber. He's terrified of Uber. But for a younger generation, and even, I use Uber all the time, it's easy. I get on my phone, I order a ride. He couldn't do that. And so it was interesting trying to learn the resources for him. So that's my effort towards what I feel is ageism, especially now in these technological fields, where I think people are more and more aware of what's needed for the older adults, but I think we still have some work to do. But Sandy?
So, ageism is any stereotype that you have that a group of people can't do something because of a characteristic, whether it be your gender, your race, or your age. And there are so many evidences of ageism that we just accept without even questioning. So, if you lose your keys, you say, oh, I'm having a senior moment. What does that got to do with it? You could be 15 and lose your keys because you were thinking of something else. It's just, losing something doesn't mean that it doesn't necessarily be associated with being an older adult. One of my other phrases that I hate is silver tsunami when talking about the growing number of older adults. A tsunami is an unpredicted natural disaster. That is not what an increasing older adult population is. We are a powerful group of people. So the constant quest on magazines and TVs to be ever youthful and to always look like you're 16 years old, why is that what we aspire to? We should embrace our wrinkles, the signs of all of the life that we've lived. So I think there are many, many things about ageism that we just accept without even thinking about them. What I would say is that a couple of weeks ago, the article in the Half Moon Bay Review was saying that on the coast, 28% of people are older adults. So that's over a quarter of the population are older adults. So when we think about how resources are allocated or how time is spent, is a quarter of the money that we have available spent on the needs of older adults. I get a feeling that a lot more money is spent on kids and youth than it is on older adults, but we've reached the point in the population where there are now more older adults alive than there are people under the age of 18. So increasingly we need to think in terms of our policies and the way we allocate our resources, that this is a population that is growing and is going to have different needs that need to be addressed. So one of the other things I like to point out is that older adults are basically anybody who's over 55 or 60 or 65, depending on what criteria you use. But that's a 40-year age span between somebody who's 65 or 55 and somebody who's in their 90s. Every decade of that older adult continuum has different needs and requirements. Somebody who's 65 is very different from somebody who's 95 or somebody who's 105. So how are we gearing up to deal with the tremendous opportunities and some of the challenges that an increasing older adult population is going to present? Something else to think about is that they say that 50% of the people who are now 5 years old are going to live to be 100. There are going to be more and more people who are centenarians. How are we preparing for that scenario? When you look at other countries, Japan, some of the other countries in Europe, they're already thinking about how to make communities and policies and programs that are suitable for older adults. And the last thing I'll say about this is that there are over 10,000 people every day turn 65 in the US. 10,000 people every day. So this is a growth industry. If you want to do something in an industry that's growing and is going to be changing and exciting, get involved with older adults.
Okay, I think that.
We were going to do the one more thing about.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, I totally forgot.
So one thing that we would like to do is, you've heard from us about our experiences, we've answered some of your questions, but I would like us to each take just 1 minute silently to think about what you can be doing to defeat ageism, sexism, and racism in your sphere of the world. So 1 minute to do some self-reflection. Alrighty then, I think that's about it. Thank you so much for listening to Lisa and I chat. Thank you.